The threat of disease is a concern that requires constant vigilance. Harmful pathogens have been around since the dawn of human history, and they continue to adapt to the new advances in the medical field. Globalization has created overpopulation, a wider range of transportation, easy access to communication, and technological advances. But what do these factors mean for the spread and threat of disease in today's world? There are more people living on Earth now than there have been at any other point in the world's history. As of 2013, there are more than 7 billion people living on this planet, and the UN expects it to increase to as much as 11 billion by the end of the century alone. And although the further continuation of the human lifespan is certainly positive, the rising potential for a disease outbreak is not.
There's a strong correlation between the risk of pandemic and human population density. We've done the math and we've proven it.
The vast number of people populating this Earth creates a large amount of face-to-face interaction and physical contact in crowds and busy streets, aiding many diseases in their quest to infect. An example of this scenario can be found in the origins of the monkeypox disease, an illness that has no cure and is spread through contact not only with people but also through contact with wild animals in Africa. If this or another uncured disease like it were to come into contact with a densely populated area such as New York City or Tokyo, it could cause a devastating outbreak, as there would be almost no way to avoid coming into contact with an infected person in such close proximity. And with the increasing population, more and more people have spread to environments formerly inhabited only by animals, and many diseases, like the one mentioned previously, have adapted to both human and animal hosts. According to Scientific American, 2/3 of all new diseases cross a species barrier.
All known emerging diseases were linked to sudden human population growth, new human activity in the environment, and a high wildlife diversity in the area where the pathogen originated.
Cruise ships and commercialized air transport are common forms of travel in today's world. In the time before modern transportation, travel was almost purely used for delivering cargo and goods to and from different countries. The lengthy trips, often weeks to a month in duration, ensured that infected passengers and crew could be identified as sick and thereby isolated from others. Now, however, people can use boats and planes to take trips to practically anywhere in the world in a matter of hours and days. And a passenger with an illness that has a 72-hour incubation period could easily travel to another country before they even start to show symptoms. Last week, a cruise ship in England docked in Maine with 200 passengers that had been infected with norovirus, a common disease that originates in the UK. This is an example of how illness could be spread from one country to the next through sea travel, as these 200 people would have most likely infected others in their own country, and thus keeping it within England's borders, but they didn't because they had the opportunity to take a fast and safe trip to another country. An example of disease spread through air travel pertains to one of the most dreaded diseases in recent history, HIV. One of the earliest victims of this disease was a Canadian flight attendant named Gaetan Dugas. As a flight attendant, Dugas was able to transmit this disease across the nation and can be traced back to 40 of the first 284 cases of AIDS in North America. If this man had had a stationary job, not only would he most likely not have become infected in the first place, but he also would not have been able to get 40 others sick. And although this disease could still have contaminated North America, it would not have been able to spread so quickly without the ease of commercial air travel. But not all of these developments are unfavorable. A more positive effect of globalization is the easy access to widespread communication. Not only are cures and vaccines being administered in a more efficient manner, but medical experts from organizations like the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization can notify each other of new discoveries and theories using cell phones and online conference calls. For instance, the identification of the smallpox disease in a businessman in New York urged the city to prevent a wide-scale outbreak of the deadly illness.
Over 6 million people were vaccinated within a month at hundreds of vaccination stations in hospitals, firehouses, and police stations. In all, 12 people caught smallpox, and 2 of them died.
Without this interdisciplinary cooperation, the 6 million people who received vaccinations could have potentially contracted the disease and therefore spread it across the nation. And if the injections had not been available so quickly, the disease would have been able to reach those who did not receive one. In recent years, Ebola virus disease has become an increasing concern, with several major outbreaks in Africa in recent years. The World Health Organization has developed several strategies to minimize the damage caused by this disease until a cure is developed. Contact tracing is one such method. A potential victim is observed for 21 days until they have either begun to show symptoms or have been deemed uninfected. Public announcements are also created in order to inform the public of the preventative measures that should be taken in order to avoid, contract, or spread the virus. Without the means to prevent or cure the pathogens mentioned before, outbreaks of diseases that are known today as treatable, like chickenpox or the influenza, could become as devastating as they used to be. However, thanks to modern scientific feats, potential cures and vaccines are being discovered at an increasing rate. After the pledge to eradicate smallpox in 1959 was made by the World Health Assembly, it was only 18 years later that the last natural case of smallpox was determined in October 1977. The disease killed more than 300 million people in the 20th century alone, but was overcome through mass vaccinations and constant vigilance. As well as vaccinations, methods such as enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, antigen detection tests, polymerase chain reaction assay, and virus isolation by cell culture provide a way to detect the presence of a disease, which increase the speed in which care can be given to an infected individual. These tests are necessary because without them, patients can harbor the disease unknowingly and therefore infect others. In conclusion, there are both negatives and positives regarding globalization's effect on the spread of disease. Overpopulation and worldwide commercial transport create easy access to illness in those infected by it. Alternatively, global communication, medical advances, and technology provide prevention and measures of protection against disease. Therefore, globalization presents both destructive and progressive avenues of impact on the world we live in.